welcome to another episode of Practicing with Purpose for Lawyers Only. I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and today I'm really excited to introduce you to Galen Hair. Galen, welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks so much for talking today.
Yeah, no, it is my pleasure. And today, for everybody out there, we're going to be talking about how to get the job done inside and outside the courtroom. And I'm going to be really interested to have Galen share his perspective on that. For those of you who don't know him, Galen Hair is he's licensed in multiple states and boasts an international client base as well. And really early in his career, he gained a reputation for getting the job done both inside and outside the courtroom. As we say, we're going to be touching on that a little deeper. And he's also a credit because he's involved in lots of community-based organizations. And when he's not fighting for his clients or raising money for good causes, he focuses on enriching his own skills, which I just love as well. He attends continuing education just to brush up. And it's that kind of commitment to continual improvement that is no doubt led him to be named as a super lawyer rising star, a top lawyer by New Orleans Magazine, Pro Bono Publico Award, I think it's called, and all kinds of other accolades. So, Galen, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and what made you want to pursue a career as an attorney.
So it's interesting that we're talking about this today because I was just interviewing another lawyer, and I realized as soon as she handed me her resume that she had the exact same background I did. She's just a few years younger.
Yeah.
So I actually came from a background in classical music, opera specifically.
Wow.
Yeah, so I majored in vocal performance in Boston and was pretty content to do that.
I love
But then
that.
kind of had this opportunity post Katrina to interact with a lot of people that were kind of going through dealing with their insurance companies from Katrina and some of the kind of natural injustices that happened there.
Yeah.
And that definitely changed my outlook on life and kind of caused me to go the legal route instead of the classical music route.
Oh, I love that. Well, I wish I'd known you're an opera singer. I would have put you on the spot and made you sing a bit for us. So, and tell me a bit more about the Katrina, the impact of that on you, because I remember even a few years after Katrina, I'd gone. I love New Orleans as a city, and I'd gone back there for a visit for a convention that a client was hosting, and I was speaking at the event, and we did a tour, and it was amazing to me still a few years after, just the devastation. So, and as you say, that absolute imbalance of how people were treated through that experience. So what was it about, what takeaways did you have that led you to jump into the law?
Yeah, so my initial impetus for going there was just to kind of help physically, right? I didn't have any particular skill set I could offer
Yeah.
but I could gut houses. I could pick
Yeah.
up a sledgehammer and I could pick up heavy bags and throw them away. So
Yeah.
I was able to kind of help with that. And every night there was this probably unparalleled and once in a lifetime opportunity to sit around a campfire and talk to people from all walks of life that were just
Mm,
there to help.
yeah.
And that sounds hippy dippy, and it is hippy dippy, but
It's
I'll
beautiful.
say this: anytime you have the opportunity to be brought together with a group of people, a common cause that brings you
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
and most of those people are not going to be from your walk of life, there's this amazing opportunity to grow and learn, which is not something at
Yeah.
21 years old that I was particularly open to.
Yeah.
So I think those opportunities kind of grab you and they change you for better or worse against your own will.
Yeah.
And so I was around a lot of law students, a lot of lawyers, a lot of sociologists,
Yeah.
a lot of psychiatrists, a lot of a lot of mental health professionals were
Yeah, I
there, which
bet.
was really interesting. And kind of watching how insurance companies were treating different sections of the community. By and large, lots of these people were being treated unfairly, regardless of race, color, or creed.
Yeah.
But there were also some notable differences for certain demographics that were having an even harder time.
I bet.
So those people, I feel like those people being all the people that I met every night, that would kind of, and look, in some ways it was hippy dippy. Like I always think of Empire Records, and there was a lot
Yeah.
of like a damn the man save the empire kind of
Yeah.
attitude out there. A lot. I've always been like such a good kid, right? So like my version of like a crazy party is I have 2 or 3 drinks and of course these people are all like getting high every night and talking
Yeah.
about social justice, but I learned a lot from them
Yeah.
and it definitely colored the way that I approach things now.
Yeah. I love that. I actually don't think it's hippy dippy at all. As someone who practiced social justice law for 30 years, I think it's beautiful and a testament to your character and I'm sure how you show up. So on that, it's a beautiful lead into how do you define success, Galen? And what would be one thing that you attribute your success to? Because obviously you've had a fair bit of that.
So I'm a big fan of a purpose-driven law firm, and
Mm,
I don't think that's plaintiff specific. I don't think it's defense exclusionary. I think as long as you have a purpose, I think you can run a law firm with that purpose. So for us, our purpose is building communities one business and one home at a time.
yeah.
That's our mission statement. Our employees and attorneys know it. And when they're hired here, they subscribe to that. So we measure success based on whether every single day is spent furthering that goal. Obviously, you're not going to win a case every day.
Yeah.
You're not going to settle a case every day. Sometimes it feels like you get caught in the monotony of the litigation process. Why am I editing this notice of deposition again?
Yeah.
Why are we bickering over discovery conferences when
Yeah.
we all know what's relevant and what is not? Those things don't feel like they're practicing with a purpose. However, the overarching goal needs to be to figure out what your firm's purpose is and continuously achieve that.
Yeah.
And I think we're unfair to our colleagues. I think if you're a plaintiff oriented lawyer, I think you tend to discount the defense bar's ability to also practice with a purpose because you disagree with what they want to accomplish. But you don't have to.
Yeah. I love that. I so love that. And I'm so glad I got to interview you here because that is very much, I created a program called Practicing with Purpose and I'm sort of on a mission. It's one of the impetuses for starting this podcast, frankly, is, practicing with purpose, all about a better way to practice law. And I agree with you. I think the more we start talking about this and showing up with empathy and an expectation that the other side will as well, we can start to actually change because most people start the practice of law like you because they want to make a difference. Right? So I love your recognition about that. So what are some ways that you help stay on purpose and keep that passion can you sort of rekindle it all the time within your firm, both for yourself and for the others in your firm?
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that you brought up that it's different because it is. Keeping yourself motivated is not the same as keeping your staff and other attorneys motivated. And if you don't acknowledge that, I think it's really easy to either allow your team to lose their way or for you to personally lose your way. What fulfills me, I heard the founder of Reddit speak this week in Salt Lake City, and he said, "You don't reach your flow state by doing, menial tasks. No one reaches he calls it their flow state." He's an interesting dude. What makes me hit my flow state, so to speak, is going in there and really fighting. I love being in the courtroom. I love trying cases. That's the worst job at a law firm. And it's the hardest job. And it's also the rarest job. And my staff probably do not find it particularly amusing when they have to get ready for trial. Right. So we kind of do two things. We have an education program, and I think that's really important where we constantly try to get the whole team to be better at whatever we do. But part of that is not just showing them. So today we're going to talk about this unique issue. We did one on asbestos roofs the other day. Why asbestos roofs cannot be replaced, what constitutes like kind and quality. Super boring to people that don't do what I do. And probably boring to half of the team. But it's put in the context of why this is important. Here's how many asbestos roofs there are in Louisiana that were probably affected by Hurricane Ida only a month ago. Here's what insurance companies typically do regarding asbestos roofs. Here's why that's unsafe and why that's not fair. So let's talk about how we're going to combat that. And I think if you don't phrase the education and the growth for your team, again, by coupling it with the purpose, you're losing an opportunity to get more buy-in because buy-in is all you really need from your team. You can teach anyone anything. There's very few people that are not teachable and are not workable, but if you don't have buy-in, it doesn't matter how skilled they are.
Oh, I love this. We are so in line. I mean, one of the things I created, it's a program called The Art of Feminine Negotiation and trying to get that adopted in law. And the problem is as soon as people hear the word feminine, they immediately sort of shut down. But the idea behind it is this idea of how we show up. We're so attuned and conditioned to see the practice of law as being completely competitive and adversarial. And so much of what we do is negotiation. When you're able to show up with skills that have traditionally been considered feminine, like bringing empathy and rapport building and trust building and flexibility to the table, you can get way better outcomes in your negotiations. So I love that you're so tied to this idea of practice as well. And I know I mentioned that you do a lot of community work as well, and work for volunteer with community organizations. Tell us a bit about how that came about.
Well, now it's almost unavoidable, right? So before, I think it was part of who I was, and it was very important to me just to stay involved in the community. I think, again, we as lawyers tend to focus on a couple of things. Either A, what we're interested in, and I think there's some awesome lawyers that do some really cool community work based on things they like, or B, what we think furthers our business, which is probably the worst reason to engage in community service.
Yeah.
Look, it's not bad if you're contributing money to a purpose or you're providing manpower. It's still accomplishing a greater good, but that shouldn't be the driver. So what we do is, instead of focus on what's going to bring us business, we focus on what do we truly love.
Yeah.
And we have that discussion as a team. We have a group called the Sunshine Committee. And one of the things they do is get together and talk about their passion, what they're interested in, and they find something that we can do, something we can contribute money to, something we can volunteer for.
Yeah.
Ideally, if we have unique resources that also, or unique skills that also will help, we want to use those first. But generally speaking, we want to do something that we want to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses kind of lose sight of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And especially with all of our entertainment and that. I mean, the way the law is portrayed, whether it's suits or whatever, I mean, people working around the clock, and the ends always justify the means. So it is so refreshing to hear your approach. Now, I'd said at the beginning about, I know you've gained a real reputation for sort of getting the job done both inside and outside the courtroom. I want you to tell us, and I think you probably have touched on a bit already, but tell us a bit about that so we can really put a pin in that for people.
Yeah, so I think, again, people probably unfairly pigeonhole lawyers, right? There's trial lawyers and there's not trial lawyers and there's settlers and and this is probably a little more plaintiff oriented at this point, because I think, unfortunately for defense lawyers, they have the same decision to make, but they're not actually driving the bus.
Yeah.
And I think that's harder for them. Their client is choosing. I mean, when I've been on the defense side, and that adjuster chooses whether that case gets tried or settled.
Yeah.
You have very minimal input. However, on the plaintiff side of the bar, you have probably unfair input because your client really relies on your judgment often.
Yeah.
We've all had that one client that won't follow our advice, and it's usually more than one, but it's still rare in the general scheme of things, right?
Yeah.
So what I think is really important is we prepare every case like we're taking it to trial, but there are cases that we know on day one we will never try.
Yeah.
And we know that for some reason, and it's usually not because of the law firm. For instance, evaluating our clients. Do they have the emotional fortitude to go through trial? We can coach them. We can comfort them. We can explain to them what they're going to go through emotionally, and we can get people that are maybe on the fence over to where they need to be. But there are some people that that's not right for them. They're too fragile. They're too hurt. They're too pained.
Yeah.
And we're actually harming them by doing what we want to do. And sometimes that's in our financial disinterest. And, that's obviously the sacred duty we all have, that even if we could make more money by doing X, if it's the wrong thing for our client, we don't do it. And, not losing sight of that is crucial. So on the outside of the courtroom part of it, what we do is, despite the fact that we prepare every case for trial, we identify early and then often what our client's fortitude is for trial and what our client's desire is regarding settlement. And every single decision that is made, and our software even reminds us to continue to make these decisions every several days, is about getting to that goal. And whether that is hiring the right experts early, whether that is discussing early settlement because our client really doesn't care about the money, they care about not being in a dispute, whether that is setting things up from a standpoint of pleadings or discovery to make sure that we have kind of laid the right traps for opposing counsel and the defendant, whatever that is, it has to be a conscious decision. And I think it helps kind of to dovetail back into the practicing with a purpose thing. If you know what that goal is, which is to get our client restored to their pre-loss condition before a hurricane, before a fire, before whatever, and you're steering that way, it becomes very easy to be motivated that direction.
Yeah.
It's not, for us, it's not strategy moving chess pieces around a board.
Yeah.
It's strategy moving all the pieces of our client's case around the board until we land them back in a new house.
Yeah. I so love that, and I agree, and I think it's often overlooked in our legal profession. So I'm really glad to have you address that. And I know even in the employment law side of my practice for many years, I think I was one of very few who would always sit down with a client at that initial consultation and talk about the process and find out how risk averse they were, and find out also, for some people, as I think you've alluded to, they're not going to sleep until they get sort of justice, whatever that means. But for other people, being embroiled in the litigation is like having a black cloud over your head for the entire duration of it. You wake up living and breathing it, you go to sleep living and breathing it. And for them, the process just wouldn't be worth it, regardless of the outcome. So I love that you bring such intention to your practice about that. Now, you mentioned software. I'm sure our listeners and would love to hear a little bit about that. How do you mean that your software actually builds that in to make sure that you're following that? I hadn't heard that before.
So we believe in technology, but what we believe in more specifically is we believe in programmable open technology that allows us to customize it for our particular needs. So on a case management side, we use Filevine, which I think people have heard of. But what people don't realize about Filevine is that it's very programmable. It's an open API, which means we can integrate anything we want with it. And we can create our own task flows and our own workflows. Yeah. So we can actually push our staff and our attorneys that are assigned to a case to review certain things at certain intervals.
Fantastic.
Or based on certain events, right? So we can actually trigger, have you followed up with this client? It's been a week. Yeah. And, remind them to do so, because the reality is we all get caught up in whatever we're doing. You have that really vicious fight with opposing counsel and you let it take 3 days of your life while you're sending nasty emails and drafting motions. And then you have 30 other clients that haven't been called, haven't been texted, haven't been checked in with, don't feel loved. Yeah. So one of the things we do is kind of leverage technology to make sure that we continuously communicate with clients, both on an automated and on a non-automated basis. And what I mean by that is clients get certain automated communications just so they know we still know they exist. Yeah. But it's equally as important to give them personal communications that are clearly not automated. You can tell when you get an email drip, even if it looks informal. Yes. And clients are becoming very savvy to that because they're getting hundreds of spam emails a day. Absolutely. They're getting fake Facebook messages asking to send them money from some friend that's in trouble, right? Yes. People think that clients are sometimes not as computer savvy as they are. It's the weirdest thing that lawyers do. They're much more computer savvy than you are because they live in this world where there's nonstop scams and nonstop people that don't care and nonstop marketing. And knowing that, I think, is really crucial. So we make sure that every piece of technology we leverage is designed to bring the client, A, a better experience overall, but B, a more personal experience. Oh, so beautiful. And I'm under no illusions that my clients are less tech savvy than me, because I am not as tech savvy as I would love to be. So I really do love that. And I wish that I'd known that you were so tech savvy a week ago, because I have a clubhouse room called For Lawyers Only, Practicing with Purpose. And we talked about robots in the law and technology and how to use it. You would have been a perfect candidate for that, Galen. I'd be happy to talk about that sometime. The short answer is it's not happening. They're going to be they're going to make our life a lot easier, but they're not going to replace what I would call the flow state things that we do as lawyers. Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And I wouldn't mind if you'd sort of delve in a little bit, because I'd read that you have a number of clients who enlist you in that bet the company litigation, which is sort of a new trendy term that's catching on. And apparently that kind of litigation is on the rise. So it might be useful for our listeners if you can tell us a little bit about it. First, what that is for those who don't know, why it's on the rise, or any tips you have about dealing with it. Yeah, so I guess at its core, the phrase bet the company litigation was really became popular, I guess, about 10 years ago, which might be as old as part of that bio, maybe about 10 years ago. But, bet the company litigation to me has always meant I'm hiring you and your success is so crucial to me that I will go under if you do not succeed. Yeah. Which frankly is unfair. Yeah. A lot of pressure. It's a responsibility we take on as lawyers a lot. And there's nothing better about bet the company litigation than criminal defense, where every single case is bet the person litigation, right? Yeah. Or family law, where it's bet my son or daughter litigation. Yeah, that's so true. I think we overemphasize the importance of bet the company litigation, but I have a lot of commercial clients where if we do not restore them to their pre-loss condition, their entire company goes under, they lose 100 employees, they lose whatever. And, I feel that pressure every day when I come to work anyway with my own employees. If I don't succeed today, 200 people go unemployed.
Yeah.
Success is always rented.
Yeah.
Success is only rented, and rents due every day, right?
Yeah.
But it's very difficult when clients put that kind of pressure on you.
Yeah.
But they do that because, again, our job is super sacred, and we're entrusted with the ability to help them navigate the legal system. So when we get this quote unquote bet the company litigation, we don't treat it any differently than any of our other clients.
Yeah.
What we see that as is more of a sign of faith and a sign that we consistently do a good job when we
Nice.
show up every day. But I've had clients say, well, what treatment? I had a contractor call me yesterday, as a matter of fact, and he said, well, what special treatment am I going to get if I send you my cases? And I said, you'll get the very best treatment that everyone else gets.
I
Um,
love it.
and he will not work with us. He's
Yeah.
going to choose not to work with us, and we're okay with that.
Yeah.
Because he wants to feel like he's better than anyone else. And our firm, we're not competing with the other firm down the street that does our work.
Yeah.
We're not competing with the other firm out of state that does our work. We're competing with Apple. We're competing with Google. We're competing with Amazon. Customer service has to be thought of globally, not just in your industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think you've really hit on an important part of practicing with purpose as well, which is don't be so desperate for every client to come in the door and have it be a numbers game. I mean, you can choose not to take on clients or to fire your clients who aren't consistent with the philosophy of your firm. So I love that. And I really love as well, and just want to sort of put a pin on that for our listeners. I love that you drew that distinction as well about the bet the company, because everything you read about bet the company litigation is all in the context of that corporate mindset. And I think so beautiful that you recognize as well, whether it's a criminal case or a family law case, or for that matter, an employment law case, or so, for everybody in those stakes as well, those are definitely, all or nothing situations. And I think it's gorgeous, your approach to it, about just look at that as a sign of faith and confidence in your abilities, and just continue to give the best you can give. I think that's a great mindset for that.
Well, and I think you just hit on some advice real quick that I'd like to reemphasize, because you and I have both been practicing for a while. And any young attorney listening to this, I don't look back and regret the cases that I didn't get. I probably missed some of the money from the big cases maybe that I couldn't get, that I thought I should get.
Yeah.
The only cases I truly regret are the ones where I had that feeling in the pit of my stomach that I should not work with this client.
Yes.
And I did anyway, because I wanted the money, and it ended up costing me so much more in terms of either money, emotional stress, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the only bar complaints I have in my history, and no discipline thus far, knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
But the only complaints I have are all clients that I had some feeling in the pit of my stomach I just should not represent.
Oh, such great advice. Trust your intuition on that. And as you say, the costs aren't just the economic cost as well. Sometimes it affects your very sense of self when you end up getting dragged by that client that just is not in alignment, put it that way. So since you've touched on sort of that, what would you say are some of your biggest fears or challenges, and how do you address them? What advice would you have for sort of younger lawyers coming in?
Yeah, so other than that, which is major advice, I would say for younger lawyers, it's a few things. Pace yourself, not pace yourself in terms of energy, but don't take on what you can't meet. Don't take on a challenge that you don't think you can win. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm just not quite there yet. I think lawyers tend to overextend themselves. I think it's important to keep a real eye on your stress level, your workload, and make sure that you're not taking on more than you can handle. That's what's going to make you an amazing lawyer down the road. Yeah. I used to be the opposite. I used to hire these younger attorneys and pile work after work after work on them until they were overburdened. And, because I came from a big law firm in New York and then a big defense firm down here, and I thought that's how we do it, because it is how we do it, but that doesn't make it right. So as a young attorney, I would say manage your workload very carefully. Find healthy ways to manage your stress. Number one thing that I think we fall victim to is substance abuse and bad stress management techniques.
Yeah.
And beyond that, this is a community, and people don't realize that because we're competitive. But I probably field more calls from quote unquote competitors just to talk about stuff and talk through things. And I really think once you find your way and find the right colleagues in this field, you'll realize it is very much like that. So go get help.
Yeah.
Anytime you have a question, go get help, because you're dealing with real people. Behind every single case we have, every single case you have, there's a real person. And if you need some help to get them justice, go get it, because they're owed it. But more importantly, it's going to make you a better lawyer, because you're going to see how other people handle situations.
Yeah. Such great advice. And it's funny, you used the word competitive a couple of times there, and I think you've definitely already touched on it, but I think it's such an important issue because of the deep conditioning we get about the practice of law. What other advice would you have for how to get away from that traditional sort of competitive, more soul-sucking, constant fight mode approach to law, to getting that more practicing, to find a way to practicing on purpose? And I think you've given us a couple of tips about that already, but it sounds like you've got some more juice there for us.
Yeah, I don't think you have to be empathetic with your opposing counsel or your other competitors, quote unquote. But I think, again, understanding what drives them and where they're coming from is really important. It lowers that stress amount. What I always say is the only time I'm competing with another firm is to get the client in the door in the first place. After that, we're not competitors. Yeah. And right now I'm sitting in New Orleans shortly after Hurricane Ida. And there are law firms from all over the country, many of which are not even licensed in Louisiana, trying to pick up claims here. And I don't care. It doesn't matter, because we're going to go get the clients we want, because of the reputation we built, and the amazing team that we have. And one of them may pick up a client I wanted, but I'm going to pick up plenty. Don't worry about competing after. Once the client signs, the competition is over. And I think we don't realize that, and we internalize that. So then we make this person our enemy. Let your marketing people compete with each other and fight all day. You do your job, which is to take care of your clients.
Yeah, gorgeous. And I hope for our listeners out there, you're getting so much of this is perspective, right? It's that mindset shift that you have in terms of how you frame things, how you look at things. And that is, you are well on your way to practicing with purpose when you get more intentional about that. So I love that. And I wonder, could you speak? I'm big about negotiation, because I believe all of life is a negotiation, personally, professionally, whether you're negotiating with your kids, your intimate partner, your coworkers, opposing counsel, or multi-million-dollar deal. So I'd love your perspective on speaking to, what I call the art of negotiation, and how you think that applies, if you do, both as an attorney and in life.
It's unpopular. My perspective is super unpopular because I don't negotiate. I'm known for saying that I don't negotiate. When we go into a mediation, we establish what our client's baseline number is. We establish what our client wants. We know that the only way we can settle is somewhere in between those numbers. And we tend to work with the client on picking a number, and we tend to throw it out very early in the mediation and say, we're not going below this. And that's very frustrating to defense attorneys. They need to be fed information. Their adjuster needs to feel walked into the process, right? And I think that if you're looking at like masculine versus feminine, I think that's a very masculine approach to negotiation. And there's a reason it doesn't work, right? Because the feminine approach to negotiation tends to be more effective because it brings them from point A to point B. I think we forget when we're negotiating that we're trying to walk them from one position to another position. But I do that for a reason, because I try to foster a general lack of negotiation environment here. When our staff needs something, they come and ask for it. We don't have salary negotiations when we're hiring someone. I pay everyone the most money I can afford to pay them for their jobs without regard to what I take home at the end of the day, right? So they don't salary negotiate with me, because usually they're shocked by how much I offer them. So the reason I'm probably such a quote unquote bad negotiator in mediations is because we spend our day-to-day refusing to negotiate in this office. A vendor, they give us a price. Well, that's not what we can afford to pay based on the math we did. Well, okay. So, and they want to negotiate. No, this is the price. I'm letting you know, this is the price. You can take 4 weeks to negotiate this with me, but this is the number we'll be at the end of the day. And I think, again, a very, maybe masculine isn't even the word, maybe just bullish approach, like a bull in a china shop kind of. But it's effective for us because opposing counsel have learned that we don't lie about it. So I can walk into a mediation at 9:01 a.m. and say, we can be here all day, but we're not taking less than $175,000. And they know that the lowest I might take is $174,999. So they can feel like they won, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's frustrating for defense attorneys, but you'd be amazed at how much it relieves the stress of my clients because it's over.
Yeah.
They can come back with as many offers as they want, whatever they want. My client's stress is gone. So
Yeah.
probably not what you wanted to hear. Super unpopular.
No,
Um,
there's no one I want to hear. I love these different perspectives, and I am happy to talk more at some point offline, or maybe have you back and do a whole session just on this because I love that. And I assume with that approach, though, because I do think there's some real value to having a reputation, so people know when you say that this is really it, that there isn't that constant, exhausting game playing when everybody knows where the deal's going to be, and it's such an inordinate waste of time and energy and stress for people. But I assume that you're open to being flexible so that, through that curiosity process, if there's actually a better option for everybody on the table, like if I come thinking I want X and you come thinking you want Y, and then as you start to get curious and find out that there's actually a better solution for everybody, I mean, given everything you've said so far, I got to believe you're the kind of guy who's open and flexible to those opportunities.
well, of course. And the other thing to remember is this: the client drives the result of the negotiation,
Yeah.
even if the lawyer chooses the path. So
Yeah.
I can work with the client. We can establish that this is the number. Let's not waste any time and let's offer it. But if something else comes in that is palatable to the client for some reason, based on logic, hopefully, but sometimes it's not based on logic at all. Sometimes there's emotional factors to take something else. Then our job, again, whatever we think about negotiations becomes completely subservient
Yeah.
to our clients' end goal, which is to reach a resolution. So
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, alternatives are always going to be considered, but more importantly, my client can tell me right now 175 is the bottom number, but he may be holding out on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
Absolutely.
may have more authority down there, so we may find that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll probably find it out in short order, which is kind of the goal, is to take some of that stress
Of
off.
course. Yeah. Now, you obviously are really intentional about having a purpose driven practice, which I think is so fantastic. And did you start the practice? I'm curious, Galen, did you start that way, or did something happen, or did you grow into that? How did you find your way into that better way to practice law?
So I started at a big defense firm, and I would not say we were purpose driven at all,
Yeah.
but they were great people.
Yeah.
But the purpose was to make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just was the purpose. Then I went to another defense firm where I would say they had more of a moral driving force, but not necessarily as a firm where they purpose driven. But that was really, really good kind of character building for the next step. So when I opened my own firm in 2011, I don't think we were purpose driven either. But in all fairness, we were so young that you couldn't really take only the cases that fulfilled you. You kind of had to take the cases that didn't fulfill you. Sometimes you had to take the case and hold your nose.
Yeah.
But it was what was necessary for survival. So I would say that the practice with a purpose concept for us was developed over time. And the turning point for me is that I had done some property casualty work on the plaintiff side by then. And I was meeting an employment discrimination client, and he was very distraught and very distracted. And he finally said, "I'm so sorry, my house burned down last night."
Oh, wow.
And I thought to myself, oh my, this man is sitting here talking about a very legitimate
Yeah.
discrimination case. And he's so distraught by what happened to his
Yeah.
home. And I guess that was like the eureka or aha moment, which shouldn't even exist, where I suddenly realized that it's really important for people to have a safe place to live,
Yeah.
which should have been obvious.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I realized that it's really important for people to have a safe place to live.
Yeah.
And we kind of decided that that would be our overarching goal, is to continue to find ways to make people have safe places to live.
Beautiful. So gorgeous. And now you've touched on it a little bit, but as we're sort of winding down here, what would you say is your top tips for people about how they can maintain passion for the practice? What's worked
Oh,
best for you?
you really have to find what works for you, and you just have to keep doing it. Routine is so important.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the same thing every time, but once you find those things that refresh you, that recharge you, you have to keep doing them. And I think it's so often that people forget that and they let that go.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. This has been fantastic. I wish we had more time to be able to chat. I know we'd slotted you in for a half hour here. So I always like to end with asking, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts you've ever had in your life? And it doesn't have to be, Galen, around the practice of law. It can be on anything.
Yeah. So the greatest mindset shift. So I'm German originally. And I had this teacher that did not, my mother is a German immigrant, didn't speak English.
Yeah.
And I had this teacher in elementary school, third grade, that kept making me read Anne Frank's diary over and over and over.
Wow.
She was Jewish.
Yeah.
I didn't realize why I was being made
Oh,
to read
wow.
Anne Frank's diary over and over and over. And frankly, didn't think it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
My mother, when she figured out that I had read it at that point 38 times,
Yeah.
figured out that there was something going on because
Yeah.
I was doing that instead of recess.
Yeah.
Again, really didn't think there was anything bad. However, that quote always stuck with me and I think affected the rest of my life, which was in spite of everything. And she wanted, I think she wanted me to take away that my people had done some really, really bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you look at me, I'm brown hair, brown eyes. I'm not
Yeah.
the typical German, right? But you know, a lot of my mother's family, blonde hair, blue eyes, and I think there was just that kind of general.
Yeah.
And but you know, my favorite part of Anne Frank's diary, and I think why I never thought I was being punished, if she says, in spite of everything, I still believe that all people are really good at heart.
Mm.
And to have that impressed upon you, either against your will or willfully, at the age of 8,
Wow.
I think changed my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Galen, I got to say, this has been so refreshing. I love your positivity. I love the passion that you bring to the practice of law, and it sounds like everything you do, and the fact that you practice what you preach in terms of really living and breathing a practice-driven practice, a purpose-driven practice, rather. So, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure having you. And for those of you out there who want to learn more about Galen, please make sure to check out his website, and it is at insuranceclaimhq.com, or check out their LinkedIn profile as well as linkedin.com/company insurance claim HQ. Anywhere else that you'd like to direct people, Galen, to be able to find out more about you?
We're on Facebook and Instagram as well, and it's the same thing. It's Insurance Claim HQ, and we've got a bunch of videos that are helpful if you're going through a loss.
Beautiful. And where would they find that? Where can they find your videos?
Most of those are going to be on the website, but we also have an Insurance Claim HQ YouTube as well.
Okay, perfect. And I'll make sure to put those in the show notes, everybody, as well. So check out the show notes and go and check it out. And if you've got a choice of counsel, I always encourage people, go find counsel like Galen, who are going to be bringing that kind of purpose-driven approach to the practice of law, because you're going to get more from it. So thanks again, Galen. It's been great chatting with you. And for all of our listeners out there, I am sure you got loads of value from this episode. Make sure to listen to it again. I think there's lots of little gold nuggets buried in there that are going to take maybe even a couple of listens to unpack. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, please make sure to subscribe to Practicing with Purpose for Lawyers Only, and make sure to share it with anyone that you think could get some value from this message. And I think as attorneys, we could all get some value from this message, frankly. So also be sure to check out my Art of Feminine Negotiation podcast as well if you get a chance. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and find ways that you can practice on purpose, and find a better way to practice so you can rekindle your passion, make a difference in the world, and negotiate your best life on your terms. Thanks for joining us.